One love, one heart, one destiny.
Hello everybody, you're welcome back again to the Reggae Appreciation Society. It's been about 2 weeks since the much anticipated release of Bob Marley One Love, a movie that's, as far as I know, the first feature film about the great Bob Marley. This film had been in the making for the last couple of years, and more than a few people had our fancies tickled by the clips and still images released in trickles over time, all leading up to its release. To be honest, I'd experienced mixed feelings since I first became aware that the movie was being made around 2022. As a staunch reggae fan, I was at first ecstatic to find out that a biopic of one of my biggest heroes was being made, but the initial excitement soon after gave way to a slight sense of dread. I began to panic that Hollywood would very likely just make a big mess of everything and misrepresent the story of the tough gong. I mean, this is Bob Marley that we're talking about here, the biggest ambassador of the greatest genre of music on Jazz Green Earth, a symbol of peace, unity, artistic and musical excellence, and one of the ultimate examples of how talent, hard work and determination can take a person from the lowliest of backgrounds and transport him to immortality as one of the most famous icons that the world has ever seen. I quietly concluded that nobody could play Bob properly, and even posted a poll just to be sure that I wasn't overthinking it. And I was glad to see that I wasn't alone. So when this movie hit the theaters on the 14th of February, the air was abuzz with Marley fever in both reggae fans and non-reggae fans alike, who all flocked to the cinemas to watch the flick. I'd made a decision not to go watch it, but when I began to see the mixed reactions, people either loved the movie or thoroughly hated it, and I didn't want to risk the latter. But after I stumbled upon a promotional clip in the movie where Bob and his team were putting a song together in the studio, I was completely blown away and got an irresistible urge to go see the movie for myself. And whatever the outcome, I would bite the bullet and take it on the chin. So on Friday evening, armed with an obscenely large pack of popcorn and an open mind, I finally watched the movie, and I came out of the cinema with a powerful feeling which I couldn't really describe, but it was undoubtedly a mixed bag of awe, yearning, and some disappointment that altogether would form an experience that was far from ordinary. Now let's take a look at the beauty, the flaws, and triumphs of the One Love movie. To begin with, the film was a collaborative production between Plan B Entertainment and the Marley family. Among others, it had Rita Marley, Ziggy Marley, and Cedella Marley as producers. The movie starred British actor Kingsley Ben-Adir as Bob and Lashana Lynch as Rita Marley. Unlike the sort of biopics that I'm more used to, Bob Marley One Love isn't a life story per se. It's set in a 2-year period between the incidents surrounding the Smile Jamaica concert in 1976 that ended in Bob almost losing his life and the One Love Peace concert in 1978, telling the story of Bob's efforts to reunite Jamaica during the country's lowest ever period. And though it's just in that 2-year time frame, the movie makes use of flashbacks to several critical periods in Bob's life that all culminated in Bob emerging as the superstar that we see at the beginning of the flick. This method is quite similar to the style employed in the 2004 movie Ray about soul R&B legend Ray Charles. But the main difference is that Ray tells the story over a 2-decade period, and it's made for a more robust storyline. So as I began to watch the movie, I was quickly sucked in by Ben-Adir's consummate portrayal of Bob Marley in the opening scenes. I mean, Ben-Adir did a fantastic job in my humble opinion. He nailed the voice, the mannerisms, and the bouncy swagger of the man from Trenchtown. But after a little while, I began to notice that the scriptwriters took a few liberties in the story, and the first inaccuracy that caught my attention was the scene in the press conference with Bob Marley in the same room with political strongman Claudie Massop a few days to the Smile Jamaica concert. But in real life, Claudie Massop was behind bars around that time. But that's something that I feel could be easily ignored and accepted as mere poetic license. As the film progressed, I got a massive rush of nostalgia when Bob drove his BMW into the Tough Gong residence at 56 Hope Road in Kingston and chatted briefly with his ital cook and sometimes manager Gilly Gilbert. If there is one thing you will quickly enjoy in this movie, it's the sublime use of Bob's music and the exquisite scenes and cinematography that accompanies each song. As a history buff, I really appreciated the amazing attention to detail, like in the scene where the band is seen going on tour in an exact replica of Bob's actual tour bus, down to the colors and the wheels. But as I earlier hinted, the movie's strongest points are the incredible scenes where Bob and his crew are making music. Early on, there's this part where a rehearsal of I Shot the Sheriff is in full swing, and the vibe was simply smoking hot. And interestingly, for the entire duration of that part, I truly forgot that it wasn't real. the interesting relationship between Bob and Rita was deeply explored, and I think the chemistry between Kingsley Ben-Adir and Lashana Lynch was quite good, even though I think she looked and acted nothing like Rita Marley, except for only one part in the scene where she managed to flash Rita's trademark big smile. Also, Bob's relationship with Rasta leader Mortimer Plano also got it looking, with a few flashbacks to how that relationship began in the 1960s. And all of this is happening against the backdrop of all the terrible violence that was at an all-time high as Bob was preparing for the Smile Jamaica concert, all up until Bob, Rita and his manager Don Taylor get shot at Bob's house 2 days to the show. Now from that point, the movie abruptly jumps to Bob's exile in England, where he begins to record the music that will form the Exodus album, all the while analyzing Bob's mental state and his utmost shock at almost being killed by his own people. But sadly, the movie barely managed to show the main figures in Bob's life over those 2 years. Aside from Rita Marley and Chris Blackwell, who get some good attention, you don't really see much fleshing out of their characters or anything else about them. The likes of Bob's pal and art director Neville Garrick, his close collaborators and band members like the Barrett Brothers or the I3s only get a few seconds of dialogue per scene, and they came across little more than a backdrop or extras. The movie would have been an excellent platform to really get to know what those people were like, and the scriptwriters really missed a marvelous opportunity. In fact, I believe the biggest flaw in this movie is how much of interesting stories in Bob's life are missing. Bob's life on its own is an outstanding story with so many enthralling facets which are left out from this film. I'm not certain if it's because Rita Marley and her kids were among the producers of this movie that certain parts, like Bob's dalliances with his numerous ladies in the UK, is totally left out of the movie. I'm not sure what really got on my nerves, the movie's non-linear style or the fact that it focuses on just 2 out of Bob's amazing 36 years on this earth. The central pillar of this movie was all about his personal struggles and battling with his inner demons, with the weight of a divided Jamaica on his shoulders. It revealed Bob's unresolved pain of being rejected by his biological father, his strained relationship with his wife Rita as his career exploded into superstardom after the release of Exodus, and my favorite part of how Bob and his crew put songs together for what has gone down as his most successful album. The most memorable scenes in this movie for me was the part where they composed Bob's sublime masterpiece, Jamming, in Bob's living room out of nothing except the Tough Gong's incredible, infectious and creative spark. I was so thrilled at that part that I found myself yelling Rastafari in the cinema. I can't overstress this, but all credit has to go to Kingsley Ben-Adir's outrageously authentic performance and depiction of Bob. Before I watched this film, I was really worried that the actor playing Bob would mess it all up, but it turned out that the opposite would happen. Instead of a crappy lead character in a great setting, it was a wonderful Bob Marley character in a film that did the actor's performance no favors at all. But after the thrill of sublime music has subsided, I was brought back down to earth by how many stories were left out of this movie. For instance, while Bob is in London on exile, JLP and PNP strongmen Claudie Massop and Bucky Marshall trace him to a park where he plays football and tell him that Jamaica needs him, before Bob walks away uninterested. And before you know it, that scene cuts to him making plans to return home and take part in the upcoming One Love Peace concert. And while this is mostly true, the movie omits the meetings and sit-downs that he eventually had with these strongmen later on in his flat in London, as well as how they managed to sell him this idea at the end of the day. Being a big reggae fan, I knew the whole story, but for those who will get the introduction to Bob Marley from this movie, I think they were badly let down by the makers of this flick, as they would again miss a massive opportunity to do justice to an already amazing story. But their biggest crime in my book is how they left out the phenomenal tale of the original Raiders group. The movie has lots of flashbacks of how Rita and Bob began their relationship, but all we ever see of how Bob, Bonnie and Peter rose to fame is a very short scene where the Wailers do an audition for Coxsone Dodd and get their break after performing Simmer Down. I think the casting for the young Wailers was simply atrocious. The actor who played young Bob Marley is fairly okay, but I laughed my head off at young Peter and Bonnie as the kids they used looked nothing like them. And of course, there was no dialogue beyond 1 or 2 words, so you get no glimpse into what they were like as kids, before yet again the flashbacks cut back to the present. And what I looked forward to the most was seeing how the movie would depict the dramatic breakup of the trio before they all got their breakthroughs as solo artists. This movie is essentially about those 2 years in the life of Bob, the superstar. And while that in itself is one interesting premise, it's just the tip of an enormous iceberg. And while of course the movie's focus was on Bob, I feel the makers of this film concentrated on him a little too much to really give the movie a robust feel. It showcased Bob's incredible persona, existential struggles, his troubled marriage to Rita, and how the couple's relationship will transcend their nuptial vows and go to a higher calling and mission. But the most sober part for me in the whole movie is when Bob gets his diagnosis of cancer and the internal turmoil and eventual triumph that Bob had over an impending death. But truly, the filmmakers really excelled in their ability to properly x-ray Bob's psyche in those 24 months of his life and give an insight into parts of him that I'd never really considered in the past. Now, many people might not like this movie, but one person I'm sure will hate it is Bob's ex-manager, Don Taylor, who was portrayed as a very shady and greedy individual that wasn't trusted by anyone in Bob's circle and was only tolerated until his double dealings became too glaring to ignore. But unfortunately, in line with the movie's trend from the start, it glosses over the full story and simply cuts to Bob confronting him. Yet again, a missed chance to tell a wonderful story. It's almost as if the filmmakers made this movie for die-hard reggae fans who already knew the story. In real life, Don Taylor was said to have overcharged the Gabonese government for a show that Bob Marley and the Wailers played in that African country. A move that angered Bob, led to a confrontation, and eventually the end of those two working together. But the movie doesn't show you the full picture or even a minute of Bob's time in Africa. Why? I have no idea. But ultimately, Bob Marley One Love is one solid movie on the central basis that it tells the story of Jamaica's most famous son, even though there are just too many gaps in that film. This movie was carried by Benadier's phenomenal portrayal of Bob, and most importantly, the magical music, which is literally the heart and soul of this film. I had no choice but to like it because Bob was the subject, but it was far from a befitting tribute to my hero and legend. So there you have it. Thank you for watching the video today. Please leave a like, subscribe, and until next time, Jah bless.